WABE in Atlanta, this is Savory Stories, a show where we take a look at Atlanta's people through its cuisine and food history.
On this podcast, we trace Atlanta's food story from the past to the present, getting to know Atlanta's culinary creators and demystifying stereotypes about food.
I'm Akilah McConnell, culinary historian and owner of Unexpected Atlanta Tours, the #1 rated Atlanta tour and activity on TripAdvisor, and author of A Culinary History of Atlanta.
And I'm Chef Asita Reed, owner of Life Chef, where we help you live a life you love, and author of How to Feed a Kid, a Parent's Guide. All right, I hope you're sitting down to a really good lunch right now because we are ready to talk about the country's favorite lunch, the sandwich.
You know, there is so much fun sandwich history and sandwich eating here in Atlanta. But, I think we should start off by shouting out our very favorite sandwich. My pick is the Tuscany at Alon's, which is made with this incredible roasted eggplant, decadent sun-roasted tomatoes, and goat cheese with chives on Alon's homemade whole wheat bread. How about you, Asita?
Akilah, I couldn't pick a favorite sandwich if there was $1 million on the line. Sandwiches are probably my favorite food group. Are they a food group? I think I shared in one of our first recordings that one of my earliest food memories was eating a Reuben with my dad at a place that is long gone called Lum's. And sandwiches in their many forms have been my comfort food ever since. Speaking of forms of sandwiches, that's a hot topic on its own. How exactly do you define a sandwich? Is it the style of bread, the fillings, spreads and toppings? What makes a sandwich a sandwich?
Good question. Is a hot dog a sandwich? Are tacos a sandwich? Because in its most basic form, a sandwich is simply meat, veggies, or cheese between bread. And people have been using bread to wrap up meats and veggies for centuries and centuries. The ancient sage Hillel the Elder wrapped lamb meat in a soft matzah or a flat, unleavened bread. In India, roti with vegetables are a common meal, and in the Middle Ages, in Europe, thick slabs of coarse bread called trenchers were used instead of plates to hold meat and vegetables. In rural France, back in the 14th century, farm laborers would receive meat enclosed in 2 slices of brown bread to eat during their daily lunch.
I mean, it makes sense when you think about it. As long as there's been some form of bread, people will naturally pile or wrap other things with it, right? It's portable, it's quick, it's cheap. So it's definitely worker food for the masses.
You're totally right. But this conveyance of bread with food didn't have a specific name until a book published in 1765. In 1765, Pierre Grosley, a French writer, wrote a book called A Tour to London, or New Observations on England and its Inhabitants. Now, Grosley wrote gossipy critiques of London, not necessarily mean, but rather wry and tart. You might think of him as a real-life Lady Bridgerton.
Oh.
And just like Lady Bridgerton describes the ton in the fictional Bridgerton show, Grosley described everyday life in London. He had a lot to say about the way the British ate. For example, though he praised British bread, he stated that the meat was excessively fatty and disgusting.
Ooh.
He also deplored the British diet, stating that the amount of beef with beer consumed in the average day gave rise to, and I quote, a whole vicious heaviness that can transmit none but bilious and melancholy juices to the brain.
The shade! Oh my gosh. Not only did he diss the British cuisine, he low-key called them all slow too.
He did, and in one scathing remark about the way the British spent an excess of time gambling, Grosley stated, and I quote, a minister of state passed 24 hours at a public gaming table, so absorbent in play that during the whole time he had no subsistence but a bit of beef between 2 slices of toasted bread, which he eat without ever quitting the game. This new dish grew highly in vogue during my residence in London. It was called by the name of the minister who invented it. Asita, can you guess the name of the minister?
Oh, I'm sure this is the infamous Earl, right?
It is indeed. It was the Earl of Sandwich, and so other people at this club began to order, and I quote, the same as sandwich. But, we know that the Earl of Sandwich didn't actually invent the sandwich, as we just talked about, because people had been eating these foods for so much longer than before.
Right. Bread, meat, bread, cheese, bread, veggies.
It's obvious. But the Earl of Sandwich was a notorious figure in the 1770s. He was known as a highly incompetent Secretary of State. He had multiple mistresses. He was the father of numerous illegitimate children, and he was a gambler.
Oh, so he was just a hot mess and an easy target.
Exactly. And Grosley's story about the Earl of Sandwich would have been very funny to the Londoners who read it, similar to a modern-day political scandal. The name Sandwich was soon picked up across the country and soon the world.
I guess Grosley thought bread and meat was too basic, but the good Earl of Sandwich went on to become legendary, and poor old Grosley's story has just been lost to history. I guess sometimes less is more.
Yeah, you got it. Now, I also want to mention that the current Earl of Sandwich is the 11th in the line.
Oh, the line's still going.
The line is still going. His name is John Montague. Now, the current Earl and his son, the Honorable Orlando William Montague, took the very obvious step, and they started a sandwich franchise called Earl of Sandwich.
So the Earl of Sandwich franchise is really from the lineage of the Earl of Sandwich. Get out of here.
The Earl of Sandwich is from, the owner is the Earl of Sandwich. These are located across the United States. We have our very own Earl of Sandwich here in Atlanta at the Municipal Market. And you can try the original 1762 sandwich, the one that the long ago Earl of that started it all. It's toasted bread with loads of roast beef, horseradish, and cheddar cheese.
I mean, that sounds pretty good.
Sounds good to me too, right?
Yeah.
So we will be back talking more about sandwiches in Atlanta after the break.
Sandwiches were a big deal in young Atlanta. Akila, why don't you tell us about it?
Absolutely. So since Atlanta was a railroad town, and we know that sandwiches, that's a convenience food. Mm-hmm. It was a super convenient food to be sold at the railroad depot. In fact, in 1884, Henry Durand opened up the Union Depot restaurant, which became the most popular restaurant in the city. I've talked about Durand's before in our coffee episode, but Durand's was known for its coffee and sandwiches, and nearly 500 people passed through the restaurant every day in 1884. That means they served over 180,000 people each year.
Those are good numbers today.
It is, absolutely. Now, Durand's was particularly known for their paper-thin ham sandwiches that people would take them along with a cup of Durand's excellent coffee and take it straight onto the trains. But now, Asado, we talked about a couple of really meaty sandwiches. We talked about the Earl of Sandwich and we talked about Durand's. Where would you go in the city for the meatiest sandwiches today?
Two instantly come to mind: deli sandwiches and sub sandwiches. And I'm going to throw Heroes, Hoagies, and Grinders under that same label. Traditionally, these are two deli sandwiches where the meat is the star of the show and piled high, like you would find at the famous Junior's Deli in New York City. So traditionally, the New York style delis is where I'd turn up to get these sliced delights. However, sandwich culture has morphed in the ATL in recent years, and we have sandwich shops that are shining with their own pizzazz. Some of the shining stars of the Atlanta sandwich world are Humble Mumble and Bonafide Deluxe, Zaddy's, the best sandwich shop on Ponce, and Fred's Meat and Bread, which has my favorite Italian grinder to date.
Yum, yum, yum. Okay, tell us about Humble Mumble. You know, the song, the name. Tell us.
Baby. Yes.
Tell us.
So Chef Justin Dixon, not only is he an ATLian, he's also a self-described Outkast stan. So Humble Mumble's named after the Outkast song. Humble Mumble is really proud of crafting their own product in-house, and they will accompany it with local and seasonal produce and supplies as needed. Their motto, no bullshit, no fake shit, refers to their drive to use, quote, the most natural ingredients they can find. They are proudly always natural and organic when possible. And sandwiches here are big and sexy and utterly delicious. I am here for the Italian job, and I love the vegetarian Captain Planet, which features a chickpea masala as its filling with preserved tomatoes, pickled onion, cucumber, and fancy greens.
Sounds delicious. You know, I don't think I've ever been to Zaddy's. Tell us a little bit about that one.
Okay, Zaddy's opened up in Colony Square, but it started as a concept during the pandemic. Chef Aaliyah Jefferson started selling massive craft sandwiches and promoting them on social media with the hashtag Big Bread, Big Meat. So she got this opportunity to open up her dream sandwich shop because Colony Square has revamped its whole food court. It's now a destination for foodies. It's a food hall.
It is, absolutely. It's a food hall. We talked food halls before. Yeah, It's a food hall.
Now, this Black woman-owned shop is a brick and mortar, so she's definitely got herself grounded, and their smoked turkey sandwich is called PMC Smoked Turkey Sandwich. I'm going to tell you what the PMC stands for. Pam's Magic Cauldron. Pam, I call her the mistress of smoke, is curating the smoked turkey breasts for this sandwich. And I love to see an entrepreneur supporting another entrepreneur all within this city. So I would call that meat hyper-local.
I think that's a good find. That's amazing.
So not only should you check out Zaddy's for their phenomenal sandwiches and huge salads, but you should seek out Pam's Magic Cauldron for all kinds of smoky goodness because, I mean, her meat's swinging, absolutely. But she hooked me years ago with her smoked salsas.
Ooh.
Yeah, that green salsa.
Love it.
It is that good.
I know you're a big fan of Bonafide, so tell us about their weekly special and their amazing banh mi.
So Bonafide Deluxe, they are bread snobs. So I think a sandwich is only as good as its ingredients. And again, this is in-house smoked, in-house cured. The meats, they're phenomenal. But they are bread snobs. And so this is what helps take their sandwiches up to the next level. They do a weekly special, and they did one this summer that I am eagerly awaiting for the return. And it's their homage to the Vietnamese banh mi. Let me just read the menu description to you. It's pho-based braised USDA prime chuck roast, pickled carrot, cucumber, jalapeno, cilantro, and Maggi mayo on toasted Alon's Tuscan roll, brushed with beef tallow, and served with a side of consomme, which is their pho broth. So it's basically a banh mi French dip in pho. It's a celebration of a sandwich. It was just like mic drop.
I love that. And you know what? I already said up front, Alon's.
Yep, we're back there at Alon's bread.
It's my favorite sandwiches in the city. In fact, for my birthday every year, that's my choice. Is I get an Alon sandwich for lunch every year because it's just that good.
It really is. I think a lot of places they're very proud of the meats and the cheeses and whatever else they've got going on. But your bread can make or break a sandwich.
So yes, we should talk about how a soggy bread, that just ruins a sandwich. And I think that's actually what makes the Vietnamese banh mi so interesting, because it is not soggy.
And it's not going to fall apart.
So let's actually talk a little bit about banh mi's. Now, these are the famed Vietnamese sandwiches. In Vietnamese, banh mi is actually a generic term referring to the word bread, but it also refers to the sandwich that is this culinary fusion of Vietnamese and French flavors. So this means that if you go to Vietnam, you should order a banh mi cong. That just means plain bread. Or you order a banh mi Vietnam, which is a Vietnamese style baguette. When Vietnam was a French colony, the French introduced the baguette, which was initially called banh tê, literally meaning Western banh or Western bread. By the mid-1940s, Saigon vendors began offering a banh mi with cold cuts stuffed inside a baguette with fresh mayonnaise, pickles, cucumbers, cilantro, and chili with a spicy Maggi seasoning sauce.
That sounds like the classic, and I love it with extra pate. We have to give a shout out to an Atlanta OG, and that's Lee's Bakery over on Buford Highway. They have been holding down the banh mi tradition. Baguettes from Lee's have been purchased from other banh mi shops for years due to their perfectly crispy exterior and light, chewy interior. And if your soul feels torn from having to choose between a banh mi or a bowl of hot, steamy pho for lunch, they've got you because Lee's offers a combo where you get half a sandwich and a bowl of soup of your choice. That's a win-win if I ever heard one. And even though the sandwiches are the rock stars here, Lee's has a full dine-in menu and the best deal for to-go, which is buy 5 by me, get 1 free, and that's how you feed the fam and keep them happy.
But, as we just saw with Bonafide, there's a lot of restaurants in the city that are picking up the banh mi and creating new variations of that. And I know that there's a couple of really interesting ones out there here in Atlanta, right?
Yeah, as ATLians have embraced Vietnamese cuisine, we've got more adventurous. Chef and entrepreneur Shyla Ban Inul stepped forward with lobster banh mi, which blends the classic banh mi with luxe seafood offerings. And Akilah, you know how much landlocked Atlantans love some seafood.
It always confuses me. Y'all, we grow sweet potatoes right here. Why aren't we eating more sweet potatoes? Why are we going for the seafood? But anyway.
Everybody wants what they can't have. And so in Atlanta, it's about the crabs and the lobsters.
Yeah, the crab is always fresher on the other side of the river. Is that right?
Exactly. So at Lobster Banh Mi, not only will you find the classic barbecue and lemongrass chicken sandwiches that other shops may offer, but you're also going to find your beloved shrimp, crab, and of course, succulent lobster banh mi as well. Banh mi isn't the only seafood sandwich that Atlanta loves, though. Over 1 million people were displaced from their Gulf Coast residences after Hurricane Katrina. With them came a bump in popularity for their regional sandwich, the po' boy. Akilah, what can you tell us about this New Orleans classic?
Yeah, so the po' boy has its roots in the 1929 streetcar strike at Martin Brothers French Market and Coffee Stand in New Orleans. Now, the Martin Brothers were both former streetcar conductors, and in unity with striking streetcar workers, they began giving away sandwiches to the strikers. Super nice of them. Mm-hmm. Originally, the sandwiches they gave away were just fried potatoes, gravy, and maybe some spare bits of roast beef on French bread. Benny Martin, who was one of the brothers, later recalled, "We fed those men free of charge until the strike ended. Whenever we saw one of the striking men coming, one of us would say, 'Here comes another poor boy.'" Now soon, other restaurant owners around the city, like the Parkway Tavern, began adding a poor boy's sandwich to feed union members and conductors for free. Realizing that the poor boys were expensive and wanting to make sure that these poor boy sandwiches would be inexpensive and cheap for the workers, the Martin Brothers developed an approximately 32-inch loaf of bread that retained a uniform rectangular shape rather than tapering out like a standard loaf of French bread, so that people would get more bread in every sandwich. History professor Michael Mizell Nelson found that as the Great Depression worsened, New Orleans actually fed themselves on these famously oversized poor boy sandwiches. In the 1930s, a 20-inch half-loaf poor boy sandwich only cost 15 cents. Today, you can still go to the Parkway Tavern in New Orleans and get a wide variety of poor boys, some with shrimp and oysters, some with roast beef and gravy, and one even made with alligator smoked sausage.
One restaurant Cajun cuisine loving friends have supported for 6 years now is the Po' Boy Shop and Basement Bar in Decatur, near Emory. Here, seafood shines once again in an authentic Cajun menu, which features one of my favorite sandwiches, the half and half shrimp and oyster po' boy. And it's not half shrimp and half oysters, it's shrimp and oysters all over the whole po' boy. I just wanted to put that out there. The Po' Boy Shop offers a full menu, which I may eventually get to because honestly, they offer over 20 varieties of po' boys and I'm still trying to make my way through it. Like the banh mi, the po' boy is heavily dependent on a specific type of bread, like you just told us about. At the Po' Boy Shop, they bring in the Liedenheimer bread directly from New Orleans to keep that authenticity alive. Added bonus, the basement is a third space for grown-ups who want to kick back and have a good time with pool, darts, arcade games, music, full bar, all the fun stuff you need to be grown and sexy. But that is a 21 and up space.
I love it. Po' boys? Fun arcade.
Okay.
Sounds good. Yeah. Tell us about a couple other great sandwich spots.
Okay, so while Atlanta still loves her seafood, let's talk about a couple of more seafood sandwiches. Let's go and look at this lobster roll over at Beetle Cat because it's their signature offering. Like there's the menu and there's this big old square in the middle and it says lobster roll. And that's just to draw your attention. to this gorgeous sandwich, which completely ditches the hot dog sized bun for a full sandwich sized roll that is nice and buttery, and it is filled, like to the brim, with a lobster, which you can have served warm or chilled to your preference. Gotta say though, the oysters here are seasonal and fresh, so as an FYI, definitely get some of those for a starter. Another sandwich which needs to be recognized is the grouper sandwich at Fishmonger. This one definitely stands out because it's not the fried grouper sandwich we all know and love when we're on spring break over on 38. It's not that. At Fishmonger, you're going to get a massive fillet of blackened grouper that dwarfs the soft butter toasted Martin's bun. The fillet is juicy and meaty and topped with pickled peppers, herb salad, and tomatoes, which actually complement the spiciness of the blackened grouper. This sandwich comes out hot and juicy, so you gotta dine in to eat it. It just won't travel well. It's not the same to go or for delivery. It gets into that mushy bun we were talking about.
Absolutely.
I also love their seasonal variety of oysters and their mussels and their... No, I'm just kidding. I'm not going to go down the whole menu. But no, Fishmonger is definitely a place to get a phenomenal fish sandwich.
I love it. Now, if we did not hit up your favorite sandwich spot in the city, let us know in social media so that we can make sure that we go and check them out. We will be back in a few weeks with a new episode. See you then.
Savory Stories is produced by Crystal Devone and Kevin Rinker, with additional production and editing from Scotty Crow. The series was created by Summer Evans and premiered on City Lights with Lois Reitzes. For more info, visit wabe.org/Savory Stories.